My hair. I want to buzz it off. I'm gonna be bald. I watched Lady Bird. Um, Greta Gerwig's directorial debut. She's a pretty important director now. She's got $1 billion movie under her belt. And her first film was a teen film, a coming of age story, following in a long line of directors choosing to have their directorial debuts be a bit more personal in teen films. Of course, I'm thinking of Cameron Crowe's first film being Say Anything, Sofia Coppola's first film being The Virgin Suicides, and Francois Truffaut's first film, most importantly, being The 400 Blows. All impressive films. Lady Bird, not as impressive, but enjoyable, an enjoyable film. And I probably would have to call it the most significant or beloved teen movie made in the last 10 years. You know, people loved this movie. People really, really identified with this movie and championed it for quite a long time. And I think people still do champion the film. I, like I said, I found it enjoyable. I think I'm going to go over things that I liked about it first, and then hopefully I won't criticize it too harshly. This is the second take for this review because in my first video, or the first take that I did, it was I was really harsh unnecessarily, I think, and I wanted to redo it and kind of keep my criticisms a little bit in check because I think I was being unfair. You'll never see that video, but this is me trying to be a little bit nicer because I did enjoy the film. And I mean, first and foremost, I would say that the comedy is clever. The most clever thing about the film is the comedy. The comedy is pretty clever and mostly hits. Most of the jokes land. It's pretty cool. The performances, I think, are all things considered fine, pretty good. I think that Timothy Chalamet is a bit of a scene stealer, isn't he? I thought that he did he was exceptionally good in the film, and I kind of like how ultimately awful his character was. I thought he was just an unbelievably charismatic presence. I thought Timothy Chalamet was excellent. For my money, the best performance of the whole film is Beanie Feldstein's as Lady Bird's best friend. I thought that she had a lot of tenderness, a lot of sensitivities, like a lot of surprising sensitivities. And since I think that the comedy of this film is probably the most clever component of it, she was also the funniest character as well. She was able to really do a lot with her character, and I think that if it wasn't Beanie Feldstein, if it wasn't handled in a pretty complicated way from an actor, that that character could have been a little underwhelming and marginalized by the kind of larger characters within the script. But Beanie Feldstein was I think pretty incredible in the movie, and Laurie Metcalf as Lady Bird's mother I also thought was was very good as well. I can see how this film is so like, oh my god, you just popped out of a box. Oh my god, you scared the shit out of me. Fuck. I just heard a whole bunch of like noise from beside me, and then like out of a fucking box we get a cat. What did you think of Ladybird? Did you like it? What do you want in life? Oh my god. Oh my god. Okay, I can see why people like the movie so much. I just have a few kind of issues with it. Another thing that I liked about the movie is clearly how much it was influenced and inspired by My So-Called Life, which is one of my favorite pieces of teen art ever. It's one of the best teen shows of all time. Uh, it might be too similar to My So-Called Life, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. Uh, some of the similarities are just so silly, but also so specific that I can't help but think that Greta Gerwig owes the showrunner, Winnie Holtzman, from My So-Called Life, stipends, money, definitely. And I maybe would have taken her to court over some of these things. My my so-called life is about a girl who's like lower middle class, uh, who it's kind of like just your typical girl who might be a little bit smarter than normal and certainly more philosophical than most, who tries to kind of pointlessly rebel against the status quo, against the systems that she doesn't understand, but can see that she's surrounded by. She tries to rebel against that by kind of dyeing her hair like red, almost pink, and dropping her kind of innocent best friend to hang out with a more sexually experienced kind of troublemaker named Rayanne, and she's in love with Jared Leto, who is playing a guy called Jordan Catalano, who is this kind of mopey musician boy who is extremely stupid, a man of few words, and pretty damn hateful at the end of the day too. But Jordan Catalano, much like Kyle from Lady Bird, also has this undeniable sensitivity to him, and the raw charisma just makes you still like those characters. Also, Angela in My So-Called Life gets into a million different arguments with her mother, who actually ends up being more tender and more sensitive than her father was, who she had always liked. But previously, they had like a stronger relationship, and but through the course of My So-Called Life, it's the mother who proves to be a bit more sensitive and a bit more tender, and that's just some of the similarities that you can find from My So-Called Life and between My So-Called Life and Ladybird. Except My So-Called Life does it so much better. Ladybird doesn't have like a modicum of the sophistication, of the tenderness or of the hypersensitivity that My So-Called Life has. Ladybird doesn't really have any of that. Ladybird complicates or convolutes like the My So-Called Life formula by introducing uh, certain symbolic frameworks that it doesn't really interact with correctly, right? Like my problems with Ladybird are many. Seems like films made within the last 10 years don't know how to interact with religion as themes or religion as text or subtext. Like movies made within the last 10 years don't know how to interact with religion at all, but they really want to. It's really bizarre to me considering that postmodernism like completely like vacated God from narrative. Like killed the concept entirely. But within the last 10 years, they're trying to return to it. I think because films are trying to be a bit more sincere or meta modern. Like, I don't give a fuck about that terminology, but films have been trying to return to religious iconography. But they don't do it correctly at all. I was totally cool taking the Catholic school and all of Catholicism and as window dressing, as basically meaningless window dressing. And then I thought it worked better when we were. When the 2 girls are just sitting there lying on the floor, just snacking on wafers, right? I thought that was great. I thought that was cool. But then at the very end of the movie, Lady Bird gets out of the hospital and wanders into a church for Sunday mass and almost starts crying. And it's like, no, no, this was a huge theme of the movie. No, this was a very big theme of the movie. Religion actually really matters in this movie. It's like, wait, no, that doesn't. And it hasn't mattered. And this isn't doing it right. In fact, at the end of the movie, I don't understand. I, I understand the end of the movie. I don't understand the intentions behind the end of the movie. Not necessarily. Because Lady Bird is a pretty cool kind of examination of ultimately meaningless forms of nonconformity until the film becomes an ode to conformity in its final 10 minutes or so. Uh, And I hate it when teen movies do this. I really do. Teen movies and teen shows. There's like a certain lie that I think writers believe that in order to tell a good coming of age movie, it has to be like the arc necessarily has to be about a rebel's journey to conformity into the fold. It has to be about rebellion until it's about conformity and like the comforts contained therein. And I think that's a huge lie and something you could only tell with like adult glasses, something that only comes from nostalgia. And I think nostalgia is a very like dishonest kind of tool. The second Lady Bird gets to Brooklyn, she becomes homesick, she becomes nostalgic and longing and even lovelorn. She starts talking about a pretty substantial belief in God. She goes to church and almost cries, tries to call her mother on the phone, or at least leaves a message for her being like, "Did you also cry the first time you drove through Sacramento? Because I did. It was kind of beautiful." Like, what the fuck? What? 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 Why? Why? Why is this story of feminine nonconformity ultimately a tale about feminine conformity? Why is it like that? Why are you like this, Lady Bird? What kind of bizarre messaging is that? It's stupid. It's actually pretty stupid. Literally everything that's cool about Lady Bird is done perfectly in My So-Called Life. Every single thing. Um, and it's a lot more complicated and sophisticated and meaningful in My So-Called Life. The Lady Bird doesn't really. I think it's a mostly ineffective kind of movie. I'm not really moved by the experience, but I do think that there is a fair amount of cleverness to the film. I don't think there's anything very interesting about the visual design of the movie, even about the structural design of the movie. There's nothing really uh, fascinating about the movie. There's a lot of star-making performances, right? Like that's cool. That's interesting. And I think that the likes of Lady Bird and Timothy Chalamet's Kyle are I think they should be legendary teen film characters because they are like pretty interesting in their own rights. They're just nothing compared to their counterparts in My So-Called Life being Angela Chase and Jordan Catalano. They're nothing compared to those two. Honestly, Greta Gerwig kind of just ripped off My So-Called Life, and the only things that she added to it that were original to, I guess, her own experiences or her own narrative talents, like the only things that she added to My So-Called Life are things that completely conflict with with its own genre, with its own philosophy. Because I think that the conformist ending of Lady Bird completely betrays not only its own genre, not only its own film, but its inspirations. It betrays My So-Called Life in a pretty large way. I the only things that Greta Gerwig added to My So-Called Life uh, are negatives, are things that I find to be not only unimpressive within Lady Bird, but downright aggravating. And a pretty large part of this movie is also an advertisement of Greta Gerwig's privilege if she actually thinks that Lady Bird herself is like what? Like her family is like really starving and really just like on the fringes of poverty or something. Like that house that she lives in is bigger than every apartment that my family has ever resided in. Like I don't care that Lady Bird doesn't actually live in the mansion down the street. And actually lives in a pretty decently sized home across the train tracks. That's wow, wow. And I'm sorry you got to go to Brooklyn, got to go to a university, and you just didn't like it. And I'm also really, really sorry that you had to go to this really nice Catholic school that you actually didn't have to go to. Like your mom just talked about someone getting knifed at the public school or something, and yes, you were really because there's parts of this film that are trying to make like almost socio-political statements about how Lady Bird is from a lesser class, like Lady Bird and her friend are from a lesser class. Literally, have you seen how the low class lives in any town USA? Have you seen that? I don't care. I don't care. That's kind of that's a silly criticism, but it's still a solid point to be raised. And when I start thinking about the conformity of Ladybird, I, I'm kind of guessing that Greta Gerwig just doesn't care, considering she does have a $1 billion movie under her belt. She's not really a symbol of nonconformity. If anything, she's a symbol of complete corporate authority, or well, sure, corporate authority and corporate conformity at this point. So whatever. Hopefully, what people are latching on to most with Ladybird is the cleverness, is the intelligence of the characters like within the piece, and really hopefully the dynamics. Ladybird and Kyle, I think that's really cool. That's like hyper cinematic. I think that they look very good together. I hope that they're getting something from the friendships. Like when Ladybird is hugging Beanie Feldstein's character goodbye in front of that bridge. That's kind of beautiful, right? That's a beautiful and sensitive moment that I thought was really striking. I see enough within this film to kind of warrant its status or like its place of great esteem within I suppose Gen Z kids, right? I get that. I get it. It's just that it's literally my so-called life, but not very good. It's, ultimately, it's like exactly what it is. Um, which fine. I mean, if this is like slightly autobiographical, because it feels very personal for Greta Gerwig. You know, maybe she just lived experiences that were very similar to a cult TV show called My So-Called Life, and I can't really hold that against her. It's just you must have known that there are so many similarities here. Hmm. And what it does differently is uninteresting because what it does differently is introduce kind of like even though my so-called life had kind of supernatural or religious connotations to some of the episodes vaguely not truly all encompassing. Ladybird decided to set the drama of this primarily at a Catholic school, but then it refused to interact with Catholicism, which I thought was a good choice until it decided that Catholicism and that spirituality and that conformity is actually not only a huge theme of the movie, but it's the end point of an arc. It's actually desirable and it's tender and it's soul stirring. Like, fuck that. What? No, it's not, though. I also thought there would be, because it's impossible not to see information or reviews or analysis of Ladybird. So I would see like headlines and stuff about the female gaze of Lady Bird. And let me tell you, it's really not there that much. It's really not really there. I think that people are extremely charitable to Lady Bird, and maybe that's because the amount of great teen films has like been on a severe decline in the last 10 years. And Lady Bird honestly is one of the better ones that have been released. I can totally see that as being a viable possibility for why it's so loved and why it's kind of overanalyzed and overpraised. I get that. My other issues with it are all sorts of stuff, man. Like whenever I start to think about the ways that Greta deviated from my so-called life, I hate it. I hate the deviations. Like, why is this a period piece? Why is this set in 2002? Is it set in 2002 just so that we can, like, in a ham-fisted sort of fucking clumsy way, we can insert religious and terroristic anxieties into contrived bits of dialogue. Like it's not really informing the piece. It's not really informing the film. It doesn't have to be based in 2002. And I find it so kind of sad that the most significant teen film made in the last 10 years that Gen Z relates to is kind of a relic. It's based in a different time. It's based in a completely different time period than the one that Gen Z are currently going through. It's almost like Gen Z don't have an actual real modern world for them to feel like in a malleable kind of tactile, visceral way. I might not be a big Greta Gerwig fan. I don't know. I just don't see a whole lot of power to it, you know? I love covering teen films. That's kind of like my area of expertise, teen films, teen shows, teen art. Um, Lady Bird, it's been hard doing this analysis because I really don't have much to say about it. I think that a lot of the reviews that I've read or analyses that I've come across have been way too charitable because I talk about how it is simply a tale of nonconformity, of rebellion, and they're right to a certain point, but I don't know how they conveniently leave out that the end point of her arc is conformity, and it's represented as not only a sincere mode of expression, a mode of being for her archetype like the natural conclusion of her archetype. It's also, I think, kind of grossly associated with the love for her mother. So, like, a love for a mother is conformity. I don't believe that that's true even at all. And I think that using conformity as some sort of metaphorical symbol for accepting and or at least recognizing the tenderness that you feel for your own family, for your own mother specifically as a daughter, it's gross to align that kind of love with a symbol of conformity. Like, why are we talking about how great it was to drive through Sacramento, even though you hate it? I mean, people tell you that you love it, but we don't really don't engage with that well at all. So I don't actually buy the love for Sacramento that the film insists that Lady Bird has for Sacramento. She clearly hates it, but we're associating her newfound nostalgia and sensitive remembrances of Sacramento with her love for her mother. I think that that's like kind of like a gross symbolic pairing. Um, and if that's truly the case, then you don't love either. You don't. I'm sorry, that might be like a tougher pill to swallow, but brought up the 400 Blows, Say Anything, and the Virgin Suicides earlier. All of those are much better films, and the leads in all of those films do not conform. None of them do, and it doesn't have to be like a tragic sort of nonconformity. Like the Virgin Suicides is a tragic nonconformity. The 400 Blows is probably like a neutral nonconformity. Like he's neither tragic nor a champion. He's neither defeated nor victorious. He's neutral. But Say Anything is a completely positive form of nonconformity. Lloyd Dobler is a radical optimist until the very, very end. Nonconformist, right? I think nonconformity is essential to a good teen film. And Lady Bird is a film that ends with conformity. And what it does so unforgivably is that it associates conformity with loving your mother. And I think that's like a cheap tactic to do when you're writing a coming of age script. I just think it's kind of cheap. There are more sophisticated ways to do this. Look at my so-called life, the tender moments that were few and far between that Angela had with her mother. They were beautiful because they were truthful. They were beautiful because they were atmospheric. They were beautiful because they were meaningful in and of themselves. Yeah, I'm not a Greta Gerwig fan, I guess, if this is what she does. Not really into it. I don't know how much nicer this second take was for the review. It was nicer. It was nicer. You're never going to see the original one because I kind of just let it go. I kind of fucking really hated on the movie. But I need to like reiterate that I understand why why people like it so much is a fair amount of cleverness. Um, the performers in it are pretty charismatic, and I would say that the characters are written with love. I get a sense that each and every character in the film means a great deal to Greta Gerwig. And I love that feeling when you're watching a movie and you're like, man, this director, this writer, these people care so much for the characters. Like they mean a lot. Like they occupy different small parts of the director's heart, and you get that with Lady Bird, and that's cool. Like it is a sensitive movie. I just think that it is so misguided in so many critical areas that it's very hard to overlook um, its faults because its faults are massive, and its faults seem to be making the most massive statements within the piece. And the most massive statement this film seems to be making is that conformity is tenderness, and that rebellion is not only completely pointless, but it is ultimately uh, naive and heartless. Which, like, you can say that about rebellion, but it's a knee-jerk reaction to the sobriety from rebellion to go, well, conformity is the answer. All these things I hated from my youth, I actually love. No, no, that is a knee-jerk response to finding out that your rebellion from when you were young was pointless. That's a knee-jerk reaction to it. Be smarter, be more sophisticated, and be more sensitive ultimately. Because just because you regret your youth, it doesn't mean that your youth was regrettable. The the teen art greats get this. Kevin Williamson gets this. Joss Whedon gets it. Stephanie Savage and Josh Schwartz get it. Cameron Crowe gets it. They all get it. Greta Gerwig doesn't get it. She doesn't fucking understand.